Hello, hello, hello. Thank you so much for clicking on to my video. It's Lacey. Welcome to Venus RX, where I discuss topics that are on my mind. Very into the supernatural. In my last video, I was talking about what it was like to grow up in a sort of town where a lot of supernatural happenings occur, and that's central New Jersey. Some people say that central New Jersey doesn't exist, but I call that stretch the Pine Barrens. And if you looked at a map of New Jersey, you would know that in the middle of New Jersey, there's a lot of inhabited woods, or not inhabited woods. I would call them, I guess, low density, like low inhabited. There's not a lot of people. As I was recalling, my hometown is a pretty small town. Most people know one another, and that's kind of how it goes. I was discussing some of the more popular supernatural things that happen in New Jersey and how they kind of get covered up and mixed in with our psychological evaluations. I don't know. But basically, things I had touched on were Crowley, Aleister Crowley. I wanted to expand on that. His name is Aleister Crowley, and how he's buried in New Jersey. He wrote the Satanic Bible. Another person I touched on was John Forbes Nash. I kept saying Princeton College. I meant Princeton University. Of course, I was a bit nervous, like retelling these stories. Another thing, and to expand on John Forbes Nash story, you could look it up, but the movie is called A Beautiful Mind. And what happened in the movie is that, when he was in college and he was doing very well, he took on schizophrenia. And in his schizophrenia fit, he was visited by the CIA. His delusions, he was visited by the CIA. I had mentioned that I had looked up his real story because he was having problem with the medication, as well as I was after meeting my own version of the CIA. And when I looked up John Forbes Nash's story, he had said that he had to cure himself in a matter of living a quiet life. He described it as living a quiet life and kind of pulling himself away. I believe it did take a bit time before he got back into, like, even, mathematicianing again. So that's another thing that I touched on there. I wanted to touch on some of the strange things, and it's not clear. It's very clear to most people who live in that area or people who visit that area that it's something strange there. Most of these supernatural occurrences didn't occur isolated, like around like one person or another. This is like stories on stories. I wanted to touch on other movies that I see that are similar to things I've experienced in New Jersey. And one of them would be that movie with Angelina Jolie. And I forgot what the movie was called, but it was about the aliens switching her child with another little boy. I know you guys have to see that movie with Angelina Jolie, where and she was not. She's like, "That's not my son. That is not my son." And it was a whole social experiment behind that. I believe that this could either be government social experiments in New Jersey. I also touched on Johnson and Johnson, aka Bristol Myers slash Squibbs. I won $5,000 in a lawsuit by them because they dumped chemicals in New Brunswick, New Jersey, I believe, where my mother used to work, and a lot of people got sick. So I'm also talking about chemical warfare that was going on there. So we had psychological warfare, spiritual warfare, as far as demons, demonic practices, and cults that move in the woods. There were even at some point runaway circuses that moved in the woods. There's Midgetville, New Jersey, like a lost town of like just dwarfs that lived in the woods. So I'm like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs in New Jersey. I'm like, and even down to Children of the Corn. That's another thing I think about. I was homeschooled as a child. up until the age of 15 years old, I didn't return back to school. It's not too out of place for people to homeschool their children there. There are Mormons there. There are people who just don't trust things in New Jersey. A lot of the schools in New Jersey where I'm at now, they have cameras in the school just to promote parents to send their kids to school. But children of the corn, we used to call those the feral white children because I live in the Confederate area. That's another thing, the Confederate area of it. The children of the corn were like basically children that were raised on farms and stuff. Think of it like Honey Boo Boo, but they were skinny. I don't know, and maybe like I don't know, not deep in the South, but there was children that were feral, and it wasn't just white children. There were black children, obviously mixed children who didn't necessarily go to school. A lot of us may have learned a trade, or it wasn't too uncommon for a kid to go to vo-tech like around my age, 15, 16, 17. Might even get only like 2 to 3 years of schooling and whatnot, just to let you know how maybe sundown that town was. But getting back into important movie, like I keep wanting to call that movie Taken, but Taken is the human trafficking movie. But y'all know what I'm talking about. You could look Angelina Jolie Stolen, something like that. I'm sure y'all know, because even if you ain't watched the movie, you probably saw like the clips of it. That's another strange occurrence here. There will be people who pop up out of your neighborhood, who pop up in your neighborhood, but not just in your neighborhood. They will pop up in a family of a family that you always known. I have like two occurrences of strange people claiming they always been there in our lives. One would be when I caught my sister. She was outside talking to her friend, and I always knew her friend. He lived right across the street from me and whatnot. And then I looked at him, and there was another guy standing there. I'm like, oh, who's this? And he's like, this is my older brother. I'm like, I didn't know you had an older brother. And then he's like, yeah, I had an older brother. And then not only that, this guy had claimed that he went to high school with me. I had three people claim that. The only one who got away with it is one girl, because she lifted up her shirt and she showed me her scar. She had gotten shot while I was entering high school. She was leaving high school. She said I was there the first year, but I wasn't in school, and some people get sent to like the charter school if they fight or whatnot. But this person claimed that he was in school. He's like, no, I was a little chunkier. I'm like, it wouldn't matter. Like I would still know you, and then they'll appear like with your likeness. Like this person had my initials tattooed on their arm, but it stood for something else. Another thing this person had was a demon tattooed on them. And I'm like, once I finally got to know this person, because of course they're like, oh, hey, hi, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, there's no way I could, like, how did I miss you? Like I said, it's a small town. I'm like, this is like either government social experiments, because like I said, those lights been in the sky, and we know a lot of people ran away to New Jersey. People like Aleister Crowley, people who were like circus people, like I said, runaway circuses ran away into the woods there. You can get a book called Strange New Jersey and whatnot. And these are the people that are usually allowed to build there. I should tell you about the people who usually don't like last in there. They don't allow for big name companies to build in like the Pine Barrens. You very rarely, you got to drive in town if you want to see a real grocery store, a real McDonald's. We might have like a shack, a stand, like somewhere that sells milkshake, hot dogs, something like Stort's hot dogs. You'll have to drive a little further. You'll see like a Wawa and things like that, and then White Castles and stuff like that. It's not at all like the city where you can just walk outside and everything's there. Chick-fil-A, this, that, whatever. You have to go to the mall for Chick-fil-A. You got to drive deep in town, like if you really want to get to I get like any food, just to describe how dense like this woods was. You got to go pretty far if you want to get to. Yeah, okay. So yeah, you would have to go. And types of people, like I said, mentioning some places like Milltown, New Jersey, and like around that area, and it being kind of like, I don't know, I guess Confederate. You wouldn't see much other ethnicities like where I'm at in New Jersey outside of black and white. There's not too many other ethnicities. There's really small amount of other ethnicities there. And it's like, I was going to touch on that politically. And, as we got foreigners coming in and me taking another look at the Confederate area and how they kind of kept us safe, except for from the supernatural, because I look at places like Patterson, New Jersey, being taken over by like Palestine and stuff like that, and how like the Confederates knew exactly what they were doing, especially like when it comes down to bringing in like drugs, cocaine, and stuff. Because that's another thing. Let me explain some of the black population in New Jersey. If you get to like the places where there are more intermixes, like Patterson and like New Brunswick, New Jersey, where there's more Hispanics and stuff like that, that's where you'll see like the decline in the behavior of some of the African Americans, maybe even like the white Americans there. I know Rutgers is over there in New Brunswick. That's the only thing that maintains like, it's strong. They're they don't enlist a lot of people in Rutgers, like, and then how that racial, I don't know, but that you'll find more drugs in places like New Brunswick, and in places like Patterson, New Jersey, you'll find more gang violence in Jersey City. Newark, New Jersey is a place I would to. I got like piercings, and we would go there to get see shows or like go shopping and stuff and then go back into town. Like I said, we usually had to travel to a bus, then on a train, then if we were traveling without somebody with a car, and then a lot of the times we would drive into like Pennsylvania or something to go shopping at like the shopping markets there. Um, just to give you some sort of difference in like the behavior. There's towns in New Jersey that are mostly black towns, like Seaside, that would be like as far as I remember, it was like a mostly white, maybe a few Filipino beach town. That's where you see the Jersey Shore at. But the black version of that would be Asbury Park. If you go through Asbury Park, that's where you could see remnants of the runaway circus and stuff. There's like clowns painted from where, like, like I said, circus people have nested there. And as far as other ethnicities, they might have gotten like bullied out, like, like, I'm not gonna lie. And then I think about it because I could see the difference in like, but that being said, I'm going to say there were drugs. I'm jumping back and forth. The drugs we had in the smaller, less low density area in the Pine Barrens were not your city drugs. We did experience with drugs, and these drugs seem to be interdimensional drugs. Outside of like the strange people that pop up, it would just be strange drugs, not heroin, not crack, but like movies like John Dies at the End can explain this. It's like it was an interdimensional drug called the sauce. It was called the soy sauce or the special sauce and whatnot. And even if you didn't want to take it, it would jump into you like anyway. So there's when drugs hit that area in New Jersey, it was always something that caused you some weird out of body experience. Drugs like DMT hit there in New Jersey. There was some Molly, but those were coming in from like New Brunswick, Rutgers, Molly, Adderall, stuff like that. Like as far as these weird interdimensional drugs that I would explain, like DMT, these things had you talking to other beings in other dimensions, like, and and taught you knowledge, and like just like showed you like, I don't know how to explain it, but there was something called space that came out. That's what I want to touch on. And people in Royal New Jersey, we're different than, we're different. Yeah. They used to like to give their siblings this and then film them having a near death experience. And I remember somebody lacing me with this and my soul literally leaving my body, and I was up above myself and I could see myself. I was looking down at myself. I'm like, what the hell is this? Like, yeah, and to explain it, no, it wasn't like K2. I've seen K2 and stuff like this. This looked like sunflower seeds. And then I believe it was, yeah, it was called space. It looked like sunflower seeds and it was like wet and sticky. I'm like, what is this? It looks like sunflower seeds. They put it in with the bud. They were like, just try it. Like, ha ha ha, watch this. Boom. Like, yo, I'm like, what the heck? I like here, I didn't panic like some people panic, but there are other people who are like, what the heck? Oh my God. Like, and they would film these and like, post these to like Facebook and stuff, and find it so funny that there's an you had like some sort of I thought I died. How can I get my soul back in my body? Like, why is my perception and how number one? How am I seeing without my eyes? Like, how am I seeing? Like, that's the type of like drugs this stuff was. Like, how am I seeing entire room? Like, and it was just like wow, like maybe I don't know, like LSD, and that's another thing. Back to the CIA, they said that was drug experiments. Part of me feels like it could have been the American CIA trying to test us and test knowledge and whatnot. And you can check out my last video. I sold my soul to the Jersey drones, where I explained that I was on some sort of astrology website, and and I signed up to and agreed an oath to take a ride with the planet Venus, and the goddess Anana and all of that stuff, so it's, and then, we're bored. So there's just lots of strange occurrences. Let me get back to these people that pop up out of nowhere because everything was strange, interdimensional. And I usually don't speak on the line. I'm like, yeah, I'm from New Jersey, blah, 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 blah. Because a lot of it is, it's hard to explain. Back to this person I met outside. Oh, I'm your sister's older brother friend. Like, out of nowhere, people that claim like they've been around. Like, and it's like, and you lived in that household this whole time. Yeah, the joke is like, okay, but either way, I can remember becoming, I guess, friends with this person, close with this person, and that's when they revealed themselves to me as being a demon. This person told me that his name was Pan, and he waited until we were alone. I met this person after I signed the contract with the Star of Venus on the Cosmic Intelligence Agency website here, and yeah, I had met him after that. I met another person after that. That's I'm not gonna get into it, but this person. So I gotta pause. Forgive me, I jump around a lot. I had to conceptualize my thoughts. This is after I signed the contract with Venus, and on this website that I met this man, and we ended up being friends. I hung out with most of the siblings. A lot of us have siblings. Our siblings, we still hang out together, all in a group and whatnot. And I told you my life was falling apart, right? At that time period. At some point, we had lost our apartment because my mom had gotten sick, gotten ill, and whatnot. But I didn't get it. I was at work. I worked at IHOP. I didn't get a chance to really get out the stuff that I needed. I wanted to go back in my apartment, but it was locked. So I ran into I'll call him Pan because that's what he then told. He was going by a different name. I'm trying to think of a name to call him. I didn't even think to change the names. I'm like, let's just start filming because this is how whatnot. I'll call him Pan, but here he broke it. We broke into my house together, my old apartment, so that I could get some more of my things. And then we went to a hotel room that I was staying in. That hotel room is around where they have the supernatural convention in it was called the Extended Stay in Edison, New Jersey, and it's not too far from New Brunswick, New Jersey. They had this supernatural convention. Literally, the show Supernatural came there. I remember I met Jared Padalecki. My sister was very into it. She had brought passes so we could go meet them from the show. Like I said, everything is like very supernatural. We're into very supernatural things and whatnot. Either way, we get to the hotel and whatnot, and we're talking, and I remember I make a joke about wanting to know what's in the guy's mind. I'm like, I wish I could just put my mind on yours and see your mind or whatever. He said, you probably could do that and whatnot. And then this is also when we're alone, and I see his demon tattoo, and he tells me, yeah, I'm a demon. That's Pan. I'm actually Pan. I still got to look into the demon Pan. I'm like, I don't know. I think that's related to Capricorn and whatnot. The demon I remember the most is Dante Lion out of all of them, and of course Lucifer and the light bringer. What are the lights in the sky? Who put those lights in the sky? The light bringer brought the lights in the sky. If you look at my last video, but okay. um he lays down on his stomach, to let me. This is me about to try to look into his mind. He lays down flat on his stomach, and then he directs me to lay on his back, like with my head, the back of my head, on the back of his head. So he's laying on the pillow, right? And I lay on his head, like with my head on top of the back of his head, and I close my eyes. And at first, I'm laughing because I'm trying to balance. I'm like giggling, laughing. Trying to balance while I'm on this man. And then I stopped. I was like, "Wait, what is this?" I was like, I'm actually seeing something. Like you see all that stuff, fuzzy stuff in your eyes. It cleared up. It went all black, solid black. I was like, "Wait." I was like, "What is this?" I was like, "This looks familiar." I said, "Is this snow?" I said, and then he's like, "Yeah, keep guessing what you're seeing." He's like, "You're seeing into my mind. It's getting clearer." I was like, "This is," and then it cleared up really clear, and it was the stars. It was like cosmic galaxy. I saw nothing but stars. I was like, whoa, this is nebula. This is like stars. I see nothing but stars. I said, I'm in outer space. I said, I'm in freaking space. And then it felt like I was flying through. I wasn't on any drugs at this time period, to let you know. I might have had a little bit to drink. I think I had like, if we're gonna have some Paul Masson. I had like, yeah, that's exactly what I had. It wasn't enough to be lit like that. And I've never seen delusions being drunk or anything, just to let you know. And then it got really clear, and it wasn't that I just saw it. It felt like I was flying through the sky. Like, I was giggling and trying to balance, and then I went into full balance, and it's like, whoa. And then I started flying through the sky with this guy. I'm like, yo. And then I'm like, we were flying through the stars. I was like, what? I was like, this is so freaking cool. I was like, just really like enamored by it. I was flying through the stars, no body. We started to get real close to one star specifically. I was like, whoa, what is this? He said, talk to them, talk to the stars. He said, these stars can talk. He said, the stars can talk. Like, that's no lie. He said, the stars can talk. You can talk to the stars. Ask them a question. Ask them a question. I was like, I got scared because we were going really, really close to like one star specifically, and he was telling me to ask the star and that I can talk to the stars. He said the stars will talk back to you. They'll answer your questions, whatever your questions are. And then I got scared. I said, I don't think I want to do that. And I rolled off of his back. But I said that was cool. I'm like, how? And there's only one other person that's done an exercise like that. There's a lot of people in my life that's convinced I'm psychic. I have another psychic page. If you haven't saw that, I'm a tarot reader. It's Rose of Venus Tarot. So if you type in Rose of Venus Tarot, this page I have to, I guess, wait until I get my clout up on this page so I can link myself here. But yeah, so there's a lot of people because I've always made good guesses and whatnot. And and it's crazy too because my ex or the guy I was dating at this time period had already warned me that he was a demon. Yo, he said he's a demon, Lacey. Like he said the same thing that I said. You came out of nowhere. He came out of nowhere. You should watch that movie Nowhere. It's a old night. That's another place that would kind of describe the setting in New Jersey. Another movie I believe linked to New Jersey is The Bride of Chucky, and I'm like, that's Aleister Crowley when Chucky said, "I have to get to Hackensack, New Jersey, where my body is buried, so I could get the amulet." I'm like, I think Crowley is buried with some sort of amulet, and we also know that like that spirit didn't die. Like he's alive. Like he doesn't like like and might possibly body hop from person to person, like doing certain things. It's like that the Jersey Devil, like and that could be different things like the Mothman prophecy. I didn't really get a lot of that. That's something that I would have hate to experience the Mothman prophecy. I experienced the Children of the Corn, the aliens, and then this weird CIA cosmic intelligence stuff, that link demons to stars. And then, but my ex had said that. He said, like, he's like, he's a demon. You can't hang out with him, blah, 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 blah. My ex had God tattooed on his neck, too. And my family was, I guess, Christians. I'm not even gonna get into the background of like this. I didn't have any tattoos at that time. Um, I had some scarification. That was a thing where we would do razor blades or erasers around then, and I still had that on my leg. I have tattoos now. Oh, but yeah, I'm like, it turned out to be true. And as I was saying, my only other experience with that would be like my mom drawing shapes on the paper and then having me guess it. And then people always telling me that, jokingly, that I killed celebrities. Because before a celebrity died, I would just start singing a song of theirs, or I would just get some taste just for them and that celebrity, and then they'll pass away. Like like I remember my ex saying, "You killed Charlie Murphy," because I kept watching all the Charlie Murphy, and then I was using Charlie. I got into an argument and used Charlie Murphy in a euphemism. I was like, I feel like Charlie Murphy, and you're like Rick James, and then I'm like, yo, it was I don't know, but he started laughing in this argument, and then next day he emailed me, he sent me a message and said, "LOL, you killed Charlie Murphy." They said the same thing with SpongeBob because I kept singing that "Winner takes all, it's the thrill," and I was like, "Yo, I gotta see that episode of SpongeBob." I'm like, and I ripped my pants. Yeah, I was saying SpongeBob. Yeah, I had ripped my pants the day that SpongeBob passed away, or maybe it was like the day before the original creator, the original voice. I'm not sure, but I remember people telling me that. I was like, yo, I ripped my pants like SpongeBob. But all that week, everything was like SpongeBob. Just like all that week, everything was like Charlie Murphy that week, and then he passed on. People hit me up when X died too. They were like DMX because I had belly there as my profile banner. I had like, I sold my soul to the devil and the price was cheap. That's the intro to Belly. Just to give it to you that, this wouldn't be my first time seeing into like minds or whatnot, but it's my first time having a real, I guess, transcendent experience, and like seeing that vividly, or like, I guess, I don't know how to explain it. Maybe like, it was, that wasn't like anything I ever experienced before. I never put my mind, my head on somebody's head and then was able to see anything. But people in my life were always trying to prove to me that the power like was within me. And my ex at that time period, after I told him about that experiment, because we were still friends, I talked to him about everything before he passed away. That's another thing. He ended up passing away. And like I said, when I say everything fell apart in my life and this spirit wanted me alone, like alone, alone, so they could talk to me, everybody. And if the person did not leave my life, it seemed like things in their life would fall apart. Not only did he pass away, they left his body to rot out for 37 days because they could not find him. And he was in a facility of like a crazy facility, too. He ended up losing his mind, too. A good portion of people in my life ended up in prison or in a mental institution. This is another thing to note. And, or deceased. And that's the scariest part here. Um, but the scariest thing about him passing away is that they couldn't find his body, even though it was in a very populated building where it was clinics. They were supposed to check on him, and they came to look for him. I'm like, I'm like, it's like that boy. I'm like, it's interdimensional. They could switch timelines up. They could make a door disappear to where nobody knows that door. It doesn't exist. Like say it's, I don't know, 13E. They're like 13E no longer exists. Only 12A exists, and there's nobody has a recollection of 13E until boom, it is. And then it's like, okay, yeah, all right, we I forgot to clean this room, and then that's when they discovered his mummified body, and they described that as mummified. I think that's important because of the ancient Egyptian, like, like things we were learning, and pyramids being used for interdimensional travel and whatnot. And that's another thing we learned on the Cosmic Intelligence website. But before he passed away, when I was telling him my experience with Pan, I was like, yo, you were right. I was like, that guy told me he was a demon. And he said his name was Pan. And he's like, I told you, Ashley, and what happened? I mean, Lacey, and what happened? I had to pause because that joke was so funny. But what the heck? Yeah, I had went to explain to him that we had did the interdimensional travel. I was like, whoa. I was like, I laid on his mind, and like, I saw the stars. I explained the whole experiment to him. He's like, that's you. That's your powers. You're psychic. Remember when you dreamed? I had dreamed that he was with a girl. Woke up, called him. I'm like, yo, you with that? I'm like, yo, I'm like, and then people always remind me of how casually psychic I am. I go, and then he said, "Lean your head on my head, like Lacey, whatever." And then and then we were smoking too. I leaned my head on his head, and he's like, "All right." He's like, "I'm gonna tell a story, and then you're going to describe what I'm seeing in my head from the story." And he started off with, "Hello, my name is Mr. Nobody." And he's like, he's like, okay. And I'm like, all right, Mr. Nobody. And he's like, I'm going my way to my nobody job. I'm wearing my nobody clothes. And then I saw him. I was like, oh, ish. I said, I see a guy at a bus stop. He's like, what color is? I'm like, okay, what color is his clothes? I was like, he's wearing a tie. He has a briefcase. He has glasses on. He's bald. And I was like, and there's a woman sitting next to him. What does the woman look like? She's chunky, she's brown skinned, and she has curly hair. And it's funny too because it wasn't even like humans he was imagining. It was like a cartoon. I said, and it's like a cartoon. And then he was like, "See, I told you," because I didn't have to get too far in that. And that's all he said was, "Hey, I'm Mr. Nobody. I'm in my nobody. I'm on my way to my nobody job. My nobody. I have on my nobody clothes. My know this. My blah blah blah. Nobody." That junk is another thing that's interesting. Nobody. Astral travel, and like I said, down to Chucky and Aleister Crowley and these body hopping type of entities hair. Like, like that's another thing I wanted to express. Astral travel with people who are within the Pine Barrens, and how people who are alive, and not just the Pine Barrens overall. I wanted to actually bring that junk back to the Bronx and bring that back to Bronx, Lebanon, and like X-Men Quiet Corner. I can remember, like I said, when I was being number one, I woke up in the Bronx after destroying a Manhattan shelter, screaming to God, 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 like and I woke up. I remember asking a patient, "Where am I at?" Like, once I sat for breakfast the next day, I'm like, "What's going on here?" And she's like, "You're in the South Bronx. This is Bronx Lebanon Hospital. Blah 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 blah." And and I remember too because she has that bipolar, that manic depressive. Like she's explaining it to me and whatnot. And me being this is where I told you that there were other patients that seemed to come out of nowhere, that seemingly like these patients were like so obviously not real patients. Hey, I'm with the CIA, but they were acting like they were crazy patients. I feel like to get information out of a couple of people was there because this is like they also had gang members there, like and I just know because they had like tattoos on their faces and stuff, and like and it is what it is. But they were trying to get information like out of people. That being said, I remember wondering, because there's the nurse that guarded our areas, and then there was a separate hallway, and she always kept her foot in the door. Like she would mostly sit on our side, but she had her little checklist, and she would keep my foot is out, like you could see my foot, but she held her. I'm like energetically to convey, but she held usually just her foot in the door, peeking into what they called the quiet corner and whatnot, to explain to you also types of things that they did there. People in our section, a guy got shot 14 times and he had a bullet whipped through his eyes and it took out his sight. So what they're doing, like on our section, they're teaching the metaphysical. They had to like Ray Charles him. I remember that because basically they would do stuff because he had to learn how to see without his eyes. So it would be a nurse that would stand on one side of the room and they would clap, "What side of the room am I on?" And he would put up his arm, "This side of the room." "Okay, good. What side of the room am I on now?" "You're on this side of the room." Sometimes they would stand here, and then get closer. "You're getting closer." Okay, walking away, clapping. "Okay, you're getting further away." These are things that they were doing to like, he's blind now. So they had like some sort of beyond physical therapy there going on. But I want to get to the other corner in which I walked. I see the timer about to go off. The other corner that I tried to walk down, which they called the quiet corner, and the nurse that was guarding it. Okay, the quiet corner. All right, because as I'm already talking about this corner, um, I started. The nurse had left one day, or she just something happened with another patient. I don't know why, but she got up, and I remember her going over to help another patient. She was a Jamaican lady. She had curly hair, and whatnot. So she's like, oh, I remember her getting up. And once she got up, I went and I walked down the quiet corner because I'm me, I'm lazy, I'm curious, and whatnot. And I'll never forget this too because I'm walking down it. Number one, all of the lights are out in the quiet, not out, but they have very small lights that are dim, and the lights are like round. They're not the big square bright lights that we have in the main hospital. I guess we're not even in the main hospital. I don't know what level I'm on. So, like I said, that guy got shot, and there was gang members there. It was just like, but I don't know how to explain it. Like, basically, the people who were in my section, like our life was about to go on differently. Some of us was about to be placed somewhere else. I'm about to be stay here apparently, like, and they were going to keep me here in the Bronx. And other people, I don't know, they get set somewhere. That being said, I started walking down the quiet corner, and another thing, and then I finally peak, like I said, the lights were dim, they were round, they were yellow, and they were small lights up in the ceiling. And the same thing for the rooms. The rooms were all closed, and I peeked into the rooms and I noticed the rooms didn't have anything but a mattress on the floor. It was just a mattress on the floor in those rooms. It was like nothing else in those rooms. And it was usually a patient laying down, or they were like sitting in the corner, or some of them would wave when I walked by, and I'm like, hi, like, here, one patient particularly, I stopped in his room and I looked, and he's laying on the mattress, right? He's laying on the mattress, and he goes from laying on the mattress and he levitates up to the air and grips onto the wall where there's like nothing. I screamed. I said, ah, and jumped back. And the nurse was already right there. And she had grabbed my back and held my back. And she wrapped her arm around my waist and started laughing. She said, ha, 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 ha. She didn't even scold me. She said, see, there's some people in here way sicker than you and way sicker than you know? And I'm like, what the hell was that? That still sticks out to my mind. I'm like, because he went like levitated and grabbed the ceiling. He flipped. Number one, he was laying face down. Then he flipped over. Like, and the way he flipped over was not natural. He was laying face down on the mattress. I looked in. He flipped over, and then I'm like, what the hell? Like, yo, I swear. And then the nurse came and took me out. And she laughed, like I said. She said, ha ha, see? And like, yo, I didn't tell nobody about that junk for like a good minute. I still, the only person I told that to was like a Tinder date who I knew I wasn't going to talk to again. I've told a lot of people I think that I felt like I wasn't going to see again these types of stories because I was tired of the crazy making. I'm like, I'm not even going to, but hey, this neither here nor there. I'm like, yo, and some people knows already. There's a lot of people who've met and seen supernatural things that can occur. That this, that's happened. And like I said, I'm like, they can't answer questions like that. That's against the HIPAA. But I remember distinctively that kind of stuck on my mind. Getting back to like the situation there. Like I don't even know where I wanted to go from there. I might just end it from there and upload this video now, and then we'll talk more about it because this is about me and me then coming into other entities, and then yeah, I did lose a lot of people after that. And there's a lot to touch on here after signing an accidental contract with scary astrologers. Like, who taught me how to talk to the stars and that the stars are real? There's more to get in on that. And just, whew, I felt like every place I went after that, it was definitely meant, and I was like purposely being shown things that were not of this element, and like and I'm like, I can't even tell people these things, like here and woo. But either way, all right. Yeah, like I'm glad that I will move on. I'm gonna tell you about where they dropped me off at in the Bronx, and then how I got into like the botanicas and the angels and the candles and the colors of the candles and the Santa Clara, and then putting Santa Clarita on my floor, or Santa Clara on my floor, and then seeing the Santa Clarita Diet on Netflix, I believe, with Drew Barrymore, a dark comedy there that is like with that spider zombie thing. Another thing to touch on, I guess, not even zombies, because like we got into the demons and we got into the demon astrology. I love you guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have, a good day, night, evening, whenever you're watching this. Hit a like, hit a comment. Tell me what you think. Tell me if there's anything you want me to expand on. I know in the last video I kept saying White Castle, but it was called Castle Hill, the Bronx. That's another thing I wanted to correct about my last video. But that's it. See you.